Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our top stories. Military chiefs of India and Pakistan will reportedly meet today to discuss the next steps after a ceasefire ends the worst fighting between the nations in decades. The border remains calm after a peaceful night as Indian military heads brief the media on Operation Sindoor. In a major breakthrough, the US and China agreed to cut tariffs by 115% for 90 days, starting on Wednesday. US tariffs on Chinese imports dropped to 30%, while China slashes its rates to just 10% after high-stakes talks in Geneva, Switzerland. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel has only agreed to a safe corridor for the release of hostage Eden Alexander, not a ceasefire or prisoner deal. Meanwhile, Gaza officials say an Israeli airstrike on a school sheltering displaced people has killed at least 10. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he'll personally meet with Vladimir Putin in Istanbul on Thursday, hours after Donald Trump urged Kyiv to accept Russia's offer of direct talks. Zelensky calls for a ceasefire to begin on Monday as Western leaders back a 30-day pause to lay ground for future peace. 68 million Filipinos head to the polls today in midterms seen as a showdown between Marcos and Duterte camps with control of the Senate key to a possible impeachment of Vice President Sara Duterte. Voters are also choosing lawmakers, governors, mayors and city councillors, with the results expected late tonight. Billionaire Elon Musk says the US government is quietly trialling a $5 million US gold card visa on his X platform. The Trump ally said that once tested, it will be rolled out to the public with an announcement from the president. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer vows to cut migration, promising to raise residency requirements to 10 years and limit care worker recruitment. English tests will be tougher, but care sector leaders warn that plans could cause staffing crises. And legendary Indian cricketer Virat Kohli has retired from Test cricket with immediate effect. The former captain will continue to play international white ball cricket after stepping away from the longest form of the game. In a joint press briefing on Operation Sindoor, senior Indian defence officials declared that the armed forces remain on full alert and are fully prepared for any future operations. Air Marshal A.K. Bharti confirmed that all air bases and defence systems are fully operational, backed by a strong multi-layered air defence shield. Vice Admiral A.N. Pramod emphasised the Navy's continuous maritime vigilance, with carriers deploying MiG-29 fighters to tackle potential aerial threats. During Operation Sindoor, Indian forces destroyed a Pakistani Mirage jet and carried out strikes on air bases in Rafiki, Murid and Chaklala. This was a response to Pakistan's drone and missile attacks on Indian territory. India's Akash air defence system intercepted all incoming threats, protecting civilian areas, following a large-scale attack from Pakistan on May the 9th and May the 10th, which included missiles and drones. India neutralised every projectile and responded with strikes on key targets, including the Noor Ali Khan air base near Rawalpindi, causing a major stir with Pakistani military ranks. Let's listen in to India's Air Marshal A.K. Bharti.
And emphatically state that all our military bases, all our systems continue to remain fully operational and ready to undertake any future missions should the need so arise. That our fight was with terrorists and their support infrastructure and not with Pakistan military. However, it is a pity that the Pakistan military chose to intervene and bat for the terrorist, which compelled us to respond.
Well, joining us to discuss the developments from this press conference and, of course, the ongoing tensions between India and Pakistan following that ceasefire agreement that seems to be holding for now is Major General Brajesh Kumar, a former Director General of Infrastructure and senior defence expert who is joining us from New Delhi. Major General Kumar, thank you ever so much for being here with us. We just heard there some comments from that defence briefing that we saw. I want to pick up on a point that was heard there, that India saying that their war wasn't against Pakistan's army, it was against terrorism, but of course Pakistan forcing India's hand with provocations. What's your response firstly to this briefing that we've had today?
Yeah, this briefing is actually very precise. In this particular operation that we've had for 3.5 days, and then of course a ceasefire in last 2 days, 48 hours approximately now. Our attack was on the terror camps. It was graduated, it was professional, it was precise. So you find that we took on the terror camps of the Pakistan, which is being supported, now it seems like, by the armed forces per se. So attack was an escalation as well, where the first time we went into Punjab province and hit those 3-4 targets, whether it's Bahawalpur or Muridke or Sialkot, 3 known places of terrorist housing, the trading infrastructure, and of course 5 others in the Pak-occupied Kashmir. So we right from day one, our focus was in a response to the brutal killing of a set of religious people, Hindus in Pahalgam. We wanted to take on the terror people and terrorists per se. And that's what we did 4-5 days back. So we were very focused. We also ensured while taking on these little camps that there is no collateral damage. We did not attack or any military target or even infrastructure for that particular matter. And the fact is that this is clear to everybody now that yes, in Pakistan they say, ये तो दहशत गर्दी है, उसके पीछे वर्दी है. This is not the Indian saying, the Pakistani saying. That means this terror which is happening around is basically because of the people in uniform supporting them. And the Pakistani average people have been saying so for a long period of time. In fact, it's an open secret. So the fact is, when we struck, it was purely for the terror. And now in the response again, of course, we've seen how the Pakistani Air Force have reacted.
Yes.
Beautifully, mercifully, except the LOC, no Indian Army troops have been used. No naval vessels or personnel have been used. Yes, they were deployed. They were in readiness to take care of any exigency that may have emerged out of the initial strike on the terror camp.
Yes, Major General Kumar, I do want to build on that because that's another point that was made during this talk and media briefing, of course, that India's defence infrastructure remains in place despite allegations from Pakistan that areas had been destroyed, there'd been successful attacks on military stations. This, of course, has proved to be false, and India's defences remain intact and ready for further provocations. What does that show about the gap between Pakistan and India's military?
See, the gap, just in terms of sheer size, is humongous. The fact that when Pakistani Air Force decided to, counterattack or after our attack, in response to our terror attack, their depth inside our country, inside India, was extremely shallow, and they had to get back. They tried, of course, activating or trying to disrupt our airfields right from the north in Srinagar, going all along the Punjab and Rajasthan and going up to Kutch, that is Bhuj and Nalia. But the incursions were very shallow. And obviously, the response which we gave little later, that is the next night, was stupendous for everybody to see. So in fact, our intent has been to strengthen our air defense and at the same time degrade the air defense capability of the Pakistan armed forces. And it was seen the very next day, the third day when we went in, we got deep inside. And we again, along the spectrum, right from, in the area of Hyderabad in the south to Sakkar, Rahim Yar Khan, Sargodha, and the famous air bases near Rawalpindi, and up to north in Skardu. So therefore, we could operate with fair immunity, as I may say, and where vis-a-vis our adversary, they could have had a very, very shallow incursion, if at all. So our air defense capabilities are very well integrated, both between the Army and the Air Force. The Army looks after the low-level aircraft or flying targets, while the Air Force looks after the higher level. The separation is at 5,000 feet per se. So in a nutshell, that was the story. And this story, it is because of this action that the thought of pushing for ceasefire, that's in my opinion.
Yes, Major General Rajesh Kumar, thank you ever so much for joining us and providing your insight there. Of course, further discussions expected to be had later today as the fragile ceasefire continues to hold. We will, of course, bring you all of those updates as we get them. Moving on now to Europe. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said he is ready to meet Russian President Vladimir Putin in Turkey following calls by US President Donald Trump for immediate direct talks. The potential summit, which would mark their first face-to-face encounter since 2019, comes amid heightened tensions and a push from European leaders for a 30-day ceasefire. Let's listen in to some European diplomats who have had comments on the next steps towards achieving peace.
In order to go into any peace talk, there has to be ceasefire, and we also need to see that Russia wants this to show goodwill to sit down and talk to Ukrainians. So it is not there. We have to put pressure on Russia to really want peace and to sit down and to talk with Ukraine.
Our position is very clear. We want peace, we want negotiations. The precondition for this is, of course, to be able to have a truce, unconditional truce in the air, sea, ground for 30 days that can create the space for negotiation.
Meanwhile, Putin, in a prime-time televised address, proposed direct negotiations without preconditions, though his aides later insisted talks must reflect the 2022 draft peace plan and current battlefield's realities. Demands Ukraine view as unacceptable. Zelensky confirmed he would attend in Turkey and challenged Putin to do the same, calling on Russia not to look for excuses. Trump, who may influence future US aid to Ukraine, urged Kyiv to accept the offer, calling it a step toward ending the bloodbath. While Ukraine's ceasefire plan remains in place for Monday, both sides appear far from common ground. A Kremlin rejection of ultimatums underscores the fragile state of diplomacy. Meanwhile, EU diplomats stated that the ceasefire depends heavily on Putin's willingness to attain peace. Let's listen in to their comments.
Well, we want to see also that Russia wants peace. I mean, it takes two to want peace. It takes only one to want war. And what we see that Russia clearly wants war. So it has been over 2 months already when Ukraine agreed to unconditional ceasefire. Russia has just played games. So I think they are playing games right now as well.
It would be sensible to end this misfortune, this criminal war. But Mr. Putin is not sensible.
Well, joining us to discuss these latest developments in the past 24 hours or so is Glenn Grant, ex-advisor of Defence Minister of Ukraine, who's joining us from Riga, Latvia. Glenn, as always, thank you ever so much for taking the time to speak with us. We had a similar conversation yesterday, looking at the situation and an ultimatum towards Vladimir Putin. Has Volodymyr Zelensky gone one up by calling Putin out for direct talks?
I think to a degree he has, yes. I mean, he's made it much harder for Trump to pressurize him because he's already sort of like agreed that I will go to the talks and I will be there. It'd be very, very interesting to see if Putin actually turns up. Somehow, I don't think he will, but I mean, even if he does, we know that he's already said no preconditions, but he's laid out a mass of preconditions. He and his team in the last couple of weeks, that we still want the four regions, and that's pretty much not going to change. That you don't join NATO, and that you don't take foreign support. And I mean, all these things, they haven't changed in months, and they're not going to change now. And I loved your sort of comment about fragile diplomacy. I don't think there's any diplomacy at all at the moment. I think there's just time wasting by the European diplomats who are showboating, walking up and down and going places and talking loudly, but actually they're just being fools. To be honest, they're being fools. They're doing and getting nowhere, and anybody with half a brain can see that they're not going to get anywhere. So it's just time wasting. They should be getting down, working out how to win this war, because this war is not going away.
Glenn, I posed this question to you yesterday about Donald Trump and his administration, but I'm going to pitch it to you now after we've heard from some European leaders. You say there that they're doing nothing. What do they need to do? They've spoken about sanctions, they've spoken about putting pressure on Putin, but is that enough in your eyes?
Well, it depends. I mean, let's just take sanctions. I mean, you can make sanctions much, much more cruel than they're doing at the moment. I mean, basically, you can put sanctions against anybody that deals with Russia. You can crush the banking system against Russia. There are all sorts of ways that the sanctions can be made much harder. Yes, it does hurt the Europeans a bit more. And Trump actually said that he can do some of these things, and he can do. But I think that sanctions on their own aren't going to work. Come on, we've been doing sanctions against Iran and North Korea forever, and they haven't stopped them being, creating weapons and creating, in the case of North Korea, creating a nuclear weapon. So that's not enough. The only way we're going to beat Putin is by actually fighting him, or by, as the case may be, helping Ukraine fight him and defeat him. And that means actually sorting ourselves out in terms of what weapons he needs, in terms of what training he needs, and getting in there and doing it properly. Because we've only been scraping the surface so far. We're just light touch, I think, would be the best way. Trying to win by doing things at arm's length. But you can't do that. You can't win a war at arm's length. And Zelensky's got to be told this as well. They've got to get a bit harder with Zelensky, a bit less lovey-dovey, and a little bit more, you've got to get your act together, mate, sort of attitude.
Glenn, you spoke about the issue around preconditions. Of course, Russia says that can't happen, but then Putin's aides have clearly given several preconditions ahead of talks.
Yeah.
Given that there is so much difference between what both sides are looking at, how does a deal ever get agreed? Who's going to be making concessions, and what might they be?
I don't think either side are going to make concessions. Russia's not going to. Come on, I mean, Putin has shown he's not going to make concessions. He's had 11 years of this war, and he hasn't made any concessions so far at all. So he's not about to start now, especially after what, in his view, would be a very, very successful parade. I mean, he turned up with all those leaders, and effectively he must have thought, it was Christmas for him to get so many people turn up and sit next to him, especially the Chinese president. So you're not going to get any concessions from Putin. And Zelensky's between a rock and a hard place, because the country has lost too many people. There's too much blood been spilt now to give in. Okay, they might accept a ceasefire on the current lines if there is a chance that diplomacy is going to, in the long term, actually get things back. But there are very few people that want that. Most people now believe that they have the capacity to sort out their defense industry and actually defeat Putin. But your average person in Ukraine also believes that Zelensky's got to change his act and actually stop choosing his friends and actually start choosing the best people in the country to do things. Because friends are not the best people to make it work.
Glenn, we are running short on time, but I do want to ask one more question. Myself, as an Englishman, growing up, understanding and studying the Second World War, appeasement was a big, obviously, topic and talking point. Given the fact that you're saying there is this impasse and there's pressure from Western allies, Ukrainian allies, do you think that the rhetoric from them might change if we see another several months or years of conflict without a negotiation and resolution?
I think that actually if we see another few years without resolution, I think that people will begin to get harder because the hybrid warfare is going to start digging into countries in ways they don't like at the moment. I mean, we've just seen that Poland's actually admitted that last year's big fire in their shopping centre was Russia. When we have a few shopping centres burnt down in Britain and people realise that Russia's going to do things like this, damage our airfields, damage other things, I think that the mood will change gradually against Russia. At the moment it's benign across much of Europe. I don't think that will last.
Glenn, thank you very much for joining us. Of course, all the time that this conflict continues, thousands of lives continue to be lost. With negotiations continuing, we will, of course, bring you all of those updates. But we move on now, and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi is headed to the United Arab Emirates. His office has confirmed just days before US President Donald Trump's expected visit to the Gulf state. Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baqai said Araghchi will meet senior Emirati officials to discuss bilateral ties, regional issues and global developments. The trip follows Araghchi's recent visits to Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Araghchi said Tehran and the US have reached a better understanding after a more serious round of talks in Muscat, Oman. The discussions, led by Araghchi and US envoy Steve Witkoff, focused on uranium enrichment and sanctions non-negotiable for Iran. US envoy Steve Witkoff called the discussions encouraging, while Iran's foreign minister described them as difficult but useful. Araghchi also warned against contradictory US statements, calling for consistency. Let's listen in to the Iranian foreign minister.
عرض کنم که نسبت به 3 دور گذشته مذاکرات بسیار جدی‌تر و صریح‌تری بود. ما مقدار زیادی از فضاهای کلی الان فاصله گرفتیم، وارد موارد جزئی‌تر شدیم.
Meanwhile, Iranian President Pezeshkian rejected US demands to dismantle nuclear facilities is unacceptable, and that it does not seek nuclear weapons, and reaffirmed Iran's right to civilian nuclear technology. Let's have a listen to the president.
در حقیقت جمهوری اسلامی ایران دنبال سلاح هسته‌ای نی. اینا هم گفتن که میخوام مطمئن بشن که ما به سلاح هسته‌ای نمیخوایم دست پیدا کنیم. ما با تمام وجود آماده بودیم، ولی این که بیان و اعلام بکنن که ما در حقیقت بحث صلح‌آمیز بودن تحقیقات در انرژی هسته‌ای رو کنار خواهیم گذاشت و بعد اینا.
Well, following those comments and of course a fourth round of talks between US and Iranian delegations, there is much to discuss, and joining us to do that is Ali M. Abushbak, an independent Palestinian researcher joining us from Cairo in Egypt. Ali, thank you very much for taking the time to be here with us. We've spent a lot of time talking about these discussions. Of course, both sides say they've been difficult, both sides say there has been some movement, but ultimately the red lines stay the same. Iran doesn't want to get rid of its uranium enrichment. The US desperately want a deal, but also want to make sure that this isn't going to further worsen into potential weapons-grade uranium. So what do you think the current status is, beside all of the rhetoric we're hearing from both camps?
Thank you. I guess the elephant in the room is the enrichment of the uranium. Especially USA, since the beginning of the negotiation, want to ensure and guarantee that Iran it will not use the nuclear weapon and has a nuclear bomb, which consider as a danger for the Western country and for the Israel as well as. So also in the yesterday, also Witkoff released a statement about the American red lines that Iran should be dismantled their facilities in Isfahan and Fordo. And also, as well as Iran shouldn't use, it shouldn't have a destruction weapon and mass destruction weapon, as we say, as they are want to confirm that. So here we are also Iran in the same Iran consider that it's a nuclear program. It's for civilians and for generated a power. And consider it as a red line for them, and we shouldn't be. It's a negotiation about the civilians' purpose for a nuclear and enrichment. It's unnegotiable, and it's not for the talk. Also, we have witnessed that the statement of Irakji, the foreign minister of Iran, that the negotiation, despite it's a difficult, but it's a useful to understand the position for each other. This giving a positive atmosphere, as well as giving how much Iran is serious about the negotiation. On the ground, Iran now, there is a multiple change in the region that lead Iran to be a serious thinking about the negotiation with America, especially after the Donald Trump, he threatened Iran, if in case the negotiation will fail, he will launch a military operation against Iran. And we have witnessed on the ground the Israeli, the American, the Iranian alliance, they are completely dismantled. Like, for example, Syrian's regime, how much they are overthrow, and as well as we have seen that Hezbollah brigade and also Hamas is suffering from the Israelis war. Ansarullah al-Houthi, they reached to agreement with America to stop targeting the American ship in the Red. So there is many different event happened during this period, which make Iran more serious about the negotiation with America, as well as Iran reached to 60% of.
Yes, absolutely. We seem to have lost Ali, but thank you very much for being here with us. Of course, the negotiations will continue. We will be across all of those ahead of Donald Trump's visits to the Gulf states very soon. But that is all we have time for. We'll continue to bring you all of those updates and more from across the world very soon.